Today, I want to warn you, boys and girls, there is a terrible mistake that a lot of people make when they record their DI tracks, and they degrade or even ruin the tone of their DI tracks without even knowing. But you know what? I'm here to help. I'm talking about a mistake, a problem that happens both when you use active or passive DI boxes. The sound and the quality of our DI tracks is so important. We're all recording DIs these days, right? We're using the DI track as a placeholder for reamping. And then later we reamp either through amp sims or through real amps. But you know what? What we want is the DI track to be as clean, transparent, as pristine as possible. Whatever you are putting in between your instrument, your guitar, and your amp, you don't want to hear it, right? You want it to be clean. But the problem is that people are very often coloring their tone when they record DIs without even knowing. Today I'm using this rather lovely AEA DI box, an active DI box, and it sounds fantastic. Don't get me wrong. This is actually one of the best sounding DI boxes I have ever used. So the problem I'm describing has nothing to do with the sound or the quality of your DI box. It has to do with how you use it. Okay? This one really sounds great. Let me just quickly show you the difference because I'm working on a DI box comparison video anyway. So if you just compare, let's say, this AEA DI box with the sound of the instrument input of my highly expensive and legendary API 3124 Plus, the API sounds so dark and muffled compared to the AEA. Let me start with the AEA here. I guess you can hear that, right? That is a big difference. That almost sounds like another pickup or something. Like the API sounds so muffled. Have another listen. So you can see it really matters which DI box you use. And yeah, in my world, I want my DI to be as transparent as possible. I don't want the highs to be rolled off, you know? So I prefer this. Now, let's go back to the main topic and the main problem this video is about. The main problem is this: the through output on your DI box. We all know there's an input to plug in your guitar, and then typically there's a balanced XLR output that you connect with a mic pre, and this is where you record your DI. Then we have another through output, and most of the time people use this to send the guitar signal into an amplifier, a real amp, either for simultaneously recording the amp, or maybe just for monitoring, you know, maybe they just play a Kemper or a Quad Cortex or something. So we have the DI signal here at the XLR and then an amp connected here. Some people just have a tuner connected. But you know what? Here's the problem. Most DI boxes, including this one, including the Grace Audio one, pretty much all the DI boxes I know, even the active ones like this one, they don't have a buffered through output. It's not buffered. That means anything you connect here will affect the sound of your pickups. It will load your pickups differently. And now, depending on the input impedance of the other device, they might sound different. And believe me, most of the time they do sound different. So as soon as you plug in an amp here, you might change the sound of your DI without even noticing. And most of the time, this will darken the sound of your DI. So if you connect an amp here, then the guitar will be connected to the amp and will behave differently. It will probably sound a bit darker, and that means your DI track will sound darker. Do we want that? No, because later we want to reamp, and then we want to go into an amp, and we want to have the, let's call it, original signal. Let me just demonstrate this. Let's start with nothing connected to the through output, just guitar in, XLR out. And by the way, I always try to play like really like percussive riffs. This is not very musical, I'm sorry for that, but that makes it easier for me to hear the differences. So now let's switch from this one to plug in a cable into the through and going into the Fryette Deliverance amp over here. Let's hear if there's a difference. And I think even my grandma can hear this. The amp really darkens the tone. It really rolls off all the highs dramatically. Let's check out this one. Extreme difference. And of course, this will also translate into a reamped signal later. I've quickly reamped these two DI tracks down here through the slightly crunchy Fryette Deliverance, through a Carnivore guitar speaker. And now not only the highs are rolled off, it also gets like kind of nasally twangy. Pretty massive difference. Again, of course, the guitar speaker rolls off some of the higher frequencies, but this is a pretty obvious difference just because you have something plugged into the through output. Now, these examples have been recorded with passive pickups, and the problem is much bigger with passive pickups. So if you are using active pickups, you probably won't have these extreme differences because they're like already buffered. But it really depends on the gear. Just to show you the effect of connecting like different gear, for example, this one here, Tube Screamer. If I put a Tube Screamer before the amp, it already gets a little better. So this is the original signal. You can see that some of the highs are coming back. But it still sounds darker than the original with nothing connected to the through output. What I'm trying to tell you is it depends on the amp that you connect. It depends on the pedal that you connect. So this effect can be more or less dramatic. But you know what? There's good news. There is a solution for this. You can fix this by using a buffer pedal that you should connect directly to your guitar. And one of the most famous buffer pedals, or pedals that has been abused by a lot of people as a buffer pedal, is this. Can you see this? Is the Tube Screamer. So the fourth track here is a Tube Screamer in between the guitar and the DI box. And let's have a listen. Let's go from the original. And suddenly the highs are back. It sounds just as good as the original. Compared to this. Now, if you wanna connect anything to the through output, doesn't matter what it is, make sure to use a buffer pedal between your guitar and the input of the DI, as long as the DI box does not have a buffered through. By the way, I talked to the guys at AEA, and they told me they preferred to use the full 48 phantom power they have to power this to make it sound great, instead of using some of it for buffering the through output. So what you gotta do is grab a Tube Screamer. Some tuner pedals can be used as a buffer. Look it up and put it in between your guitar and the DI box, and the problem is hopefully solved. Again, if you're playing active pickups, you might not even run into bigger problems, but you better be safe. Anyway, I think there's a lot of people now rethinking about the DIs they have been recording with super expensive DI boxes. And I hope this video could help you. So it's not really about buying a new DI box. It's just about making sure you buffer the signal before it enters the DI box. I'm going to continue now working on my big DI box shootout. If there are any DI boxes you want to see in that shootout, let me know. But I'm gonna include the Grace Audio one because people tell me it's the most transparent sounding DI box on earth. This one is already badass. And I'm gonna include the Harrison because I was surprised. Harrison Audio. Everything I try from Harrison Audio actually sounds really, really good. And I'm gonna try my Cranbourne input and the API and maybe a few more. That will be an interesting video. Keep your DI tracks clean. Always have a buffer ready. I see you in hell, motherfuckers. Thanks for watching. Bye.